Okay, we're going to move on to the next session, which is another of our creative interludes. If your brain was not already expanded enough, it is going to continue expanding. For this, we've got Jake Elwes. Jake's an artist and creative computer programmer living and working in London. In his art, Jake engages with both the history and tropes of fine art and the possibilities and consequences of digital code. His most recent projects explore how we interact with and conceive of technology and AI, exploring the technology, philosophy, and ethics behind it, and asking questions such as what happens to artistic agency when working with AI. I'm really excited about this session, so please give Jake a big round of applause.
Hey, I'm Jake. I'm an artist using machine learning, and I prefer to use the term machine learning to AI because I feel that AI has this kind of fear-mongering going on, and a lot of people don't really know what it is. So I like the sort of much more pragmatic machine learning. This is the tool that we are using. I'd like to show you a few of my artworks, and to do that, first I'd like to just talk about a couple of concepts that have really inspired me as an artist. So a couple of concepts in machine learning is first the concept of a latent space. I don't know if a lot of engineers here are probably very familiar with these ideas, but for me, kind of coming to this not as a computer scientist or a programmer, I came to this as an artist. I went to a very traditional art school where I was the only person really coding, and I just got so excited by the sort of philosophical implications of what happens when you open up this black box that is machine learning and using deep neural networks. So firstly, this idea of a latent space really caught me. And it's this concept that you can have this multi-dimensional space, which is the result of training a network. And that space contains information in multiple dimensions. So we can't really visualize this as humans. I've kind of put up this like abstract concept of like a three-dimensional cloud. But what you can do is you can take, so let's say, an algorithm that has learned to classify images of different kinds of birds, right? And it will learn from all of these different birds what different beaks look like and what different feathering looks like, and it will plot all of these things in this space and say, okay, well, all of the pigeons live over here, and all of the swallows live over here in this space. You can do this with the whole of the English language as well, which kind of blew my mind. You can see like the meaning between words by doing mathematical functions in space, and it starts to point out things like bias. And you can do it with sound as well, and there are really clever ways that you can take this multidimensional space and make it something that we can understand in 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions. So that's the first concept that really grabbed me, like this kind of spatial mapping thing of machine learning. The second thing is a generative adversarial network. So this is this idea that you can train an algorithm to get really good at classifying something, saying these are all 90% certainty images of, let's say, flowers, like in this diagram. And then what you can do is you can feed another network which knows nothing about that thing, and it starts from scratch. It starts from images of noise, of nothingness, and it will keep on iterating to try to make the most realistic fake image of a new flower. So not an image that was in the original data set, but a completely new image, a simulacra. And for me, that is such an exciting concept as a visual artist, this idea of creating something that is so close to reality, but it's mimicry. It's looking at a data set of images, and it's trying to create something new. So with that in mind, the first work that I'd like to show you is one of my first experiments with this. So I've called this latent space. And what this is it's moving around this space, and it's using a generator to try and generate images, but it's not settling on anything. It's not trying to generate the most realistic image it can of a bird or whatever it might be. Instead, it's kind of skirting through this space. As you can see, it's like incredibly painterly, and I showed this alongside a lot of painters, and they got quite shocked by this. They're like, how can, a machine have kind of dreamt these things up? I had no idea what it was going to produce. And what comes out is these like extraordinary abstract forms. It's kind of learnt the rules of thirds maybe from the photographic data set. And people couldn't quite believe that this was producing something. The next piece that I'd like to show is kind of an extension from that. And I thought it would be interesting to have two different networks that were talking to each other. So one network is a language model that learns to classify things in images. And it's saying, OK, so it's seeing a sky is blue and clear in this image here. And now it's settled on something. And it's saying, OK, now it sees a bird has a red beak. So it's trying to generate a new image of a bird with a red beak. And this is like showing the limitation of this latent space, of everything this network has learned. And the biases within it. I mean, this thing is stupid. It has such a limited vocabulary, such a limited visual vocabulary, that it's in a man's head. I think it's really interesting in terms of like agency. I didn't really know what it was going to produce here, but kind of seeing it go off. But I also don't want to assign it agency. I don't want to anthropomorphize this algorithm. It's a very stupid model. It's just as smart as the data we have fed it. But again, this piece is kind of opening up this black box and trying to see what it actually contains. I think I'm running a bit low on time, but I'll quickly talk about, this is one of my latest pieces. All of the sound you can hear has also been completely generated using machine learning from 3 hours of field recordings in the Essex marshes. So this piece here, these are all generated birds that I've taken out to a childhood landscape. This is somewhere I've been going to since I was a kid. The marshes in Essex, and I was wading in the mud, kind of up to here, taking out this Perspex screen. It's actually there in the mud. So this synthetic bird is being projected across the landscape with the real birds behind it. It's a piece called Cusp, which has been showing recently in Beijing and in the Natural History Museum in Berlin. Here's a picture of me wading through the mud and some of my synthetic birds. So the last piece that I'd like to briefly show you is a piece called ZZ. So this is my AI drag kit. It's showing outside. You can kind of watch it in the break. It was originally a commission, and I worked with the Edinburgh Futures Institute, Experiential AI, and it showed during the festival this summer. So this piece started with this idea that Facebook and governments and Google are using these standardized data sets. So there's one called Celeb AHQ, which is images of celebrities' faces. And they're royalty-free images taken from the internet of celebrities in America. And basically, it contains all the biases of the Americans that made it, mostly cis white men in America, the engineers, and also the amount of labor. It took hundreds of thousands of hours of human time, paid minimum wage, to label this data set. So I was interested in this idea of querying the data set as a kind of way of obfuscating it, but also to kind of point out the nuances that it's missing. So, for instance, their data sets don't really contain images of trans people or are really bad at recognizing images of women of color. So I injected into their data set 1,000 images of drag performers, so drag kings, drag queens, gender fluidity, and as a kind of way of challenging gender, and this is the results that we've got. So you can follow them on Instagram at ZZDrag. I'm hoping to collaborate with some theorists and some performers in the future on this project to maybe create something more performative. Yeah, thank you.